Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Books I Should Have Read a Long Time Ago, desultorily chosen based on how I feel at the time, but really should have read them sooner. This week's book is a book that my father had recommended to me till he was blue in the face, and I ignored him because I really didn't feel like reading it, and just never got around to it until now. So, what is this book? Nesbit's The Railway Children. This is not the cover of the edition that I read, because the edition that I read was the edition that is currently up on Project Gutenberg. That actually has no cover. So I got a cover just, for something to put up here while I'm talking. The Railway Children is a book that speaks to me very firmly of exactly why it is that I have never been hugely enamored of Five Children in It and the two sequels that make up that trilogy. And, I read it, and I liked it fine when I read that trilogy at the time, and I may even someday get around to rereading that, because, I liked it fine at the time. But it's not a book that I ever felt any need to go back to, and it's because Nesbit is such a grounded author that when she writes fantasy, which Five Children in It and indeed her Book of Dragons are, when she writes fantasy, there's a sense of a solidity to it, a solid thud of realism in it that sort of runs counter to how fantasy sort of should feel, at least to me. That there's less of that sense of whimsy, of possibility, of excitement that is sort of the quality that I enjoy in fantasy. And the thing about The Railway Children is that because this is a book that is solidly grounded in reality, in the reality of, 1900 and change, but nonetheless, that reality, that limited sense of possibility, that awareness that these children have expectations and thoughts and considerations that are maybe a little bit too whimsical for us, grim, boring adults, but are nonetheless bound by, the strictures of what's real. It works far better here. And that's the thing about. And the thing about this, of course, is that she does have a whimsy to her writing. We're not talking about Lucy Montgomery, who tends to, who has a light touch when she's writing, say, the Anne books, but, is thoroughly grounded in this is just how people are. In this case, there's sort of this run-on sentence feeling, and it's not an actual run-on sentence, but it feels like a run-on sentence when the book opens, when she says, "They were not railway children to begin with. I don't suppose they had ever thought about railways except as a means of getting to Masculine and Cook's and the pantomime, zoological gardens, and Madame Tussauds. They were just ordinary suburban children, and they lived with their father and mother in an ordinary red brick-fronted villa, with coloured glass in the front door, a tiled passage that was called a hall, a bathroom with hot and cold water, electric bells, French windows, and a good deal of white paint, and every modern convenience, as the house agents say." You have sort of just this run-on quality of describing things in a way that I think is in some ways meant to emulate that way that children are often thought of talking, that sort of going on and on and on about things that are of interest to them and the points of interest to them, and without a consideration to how other people will think of things. Anyways, so this is just by way of saying that I feel like the Railway Children, and consequently probably her other non-fantasy offerings, thus meet her style a little bit better because she's whimsical for reality, but not quite whimsical enough for fantasy, if that makes any sense. Then again, it's been a very long time since I read Five Children in It, and perhaps my memories of that have thinned, but I just remember feeling less enthused about that than I did about A Little Princess and other books not by E. Nesbit. Anyways, so The Railway Children is about these three children and their mother, predominantly. The father is present at the start of the book and then goes away. And abruptly the family becomes poor, one assumes because their father, as the primary breadwinner, is no longer there, making money. And so they have to move out into the country, into a house that's out in the middle of nowhere, and they have to be extremely economical. And so the thing is that throughout this book, through the bulk of it, we don't know why their father left. It's very much a mystery. We just know that the mother has taken to writing professionally in order to make a living for herself and her children, now that they're living in some place that is not as expensive as the suburbs, because, London is very expensive, always has been. But the children become known as the Railway Children because of that very first day when they see a railway and they decide to just start waving at the 9:15 train every day. And there's a gentleman in the train who waves back at them, and they, start spending time around the railway station and around the railway. And so their lives wind up sort of centering around it. The boy, Peter, decides that he's going to, steal some coal because they're very poor now all of a sudden, and it's a sudden cold snap in June, and, that they wanted to start a fire, and their mother says, "I'm sorry, dear, we can't, we're poor, and we can't afford to, use up coal, not in the middle of June." So he goes and steals some coal from the railway and gets caught, and they manage to talk their way out of it, mainly by, in effect, appealing to the man's sense of charity, and he tells them, well, what you did was still stealing, but you know what? I will let you get away with it that once, because you stole, a bucket of coal from a railway, and railways go through coal like there's, nobody's business, because at this time, you had coal train engines, and that was how you drove them, which meant that there was, millions of tons of coal in the railway system. So a bucket of coal hauled off by, three children is hardly going to, bankrupt them if they let them get away with it the one time. But the kids, upon having it explained to them that it doesn't matter what kind of word tricks you try to use, stealing someone else's coal is still stealing, even if it is the railway. And so they're very sorry, but they become friends with, the station master. They become friends with engineers. And over the course of this book, they, do various charitable things and request, charity from things. Their mother is often put in an extremely difficult position, not merely because her kids are constantly saying, "Hey, Mom, can you help take care of this person?" And she's like, I'm very glad you're so generous, but we have no money, guys. She's put in that position several times, But she's also several times put in the position of these kids who have asked somebody to please, please, please provide their mother with stuff so she can get better because she is very ill and they are very worried and they have no money to afford things that the doctor has told them they need to get for her. And so, a kindly gentleman on the railway does them this favor, and they have to tell their mother once she's better, by the way, we begged for help from this guy, and the mother's like, oh my god, why? Why are you begging for charity? We can't do this, guys. We can't keep begging people for stuff. The thing is, of course, that she does it in a much more lighthearted English children's novel parent way. Oh, my darlings, you must understand. There's a lot of that in this book. But most of the way through the book, we finally find out why the father went away, and it's because this is apparently post one of the wars with the Russians that went on during, at the turn of the century, because there's always a war with somebody going on somewhere. Anyways, so the English had been particularly persnickety about it, and the children's father had been accused of committing treason, as somebody planted a bunch of letters indicating that he had committed that treason in his desk, and so he had been sent to prison for 5 years for treason, which one of the kids the eldest, Roberta, who goes by Bobby throughout the book, finds out by accident upon seeing a newspaper clipping that just sort of wound up in her hands in the due course of events, and the newspaper clipping says, describes their father being sent to prison, which is how we find out that where the father went. I mean, it was fairly obvious as you read the book that the father has been carted away for something, whether he's been, drafted into an army or, into some criminal enterprise or taken to prison. Perhaps more obvious to people who aren't me, who can't, who never, because I never understand foreshadowing or implications or anything. I never do, because I'm terrible at paying attention to that kind of stuff. I don't know if I've ever given the impression that I'm good at it, but if I ever have, you're wrong, I'm bad at it. Anyways, so they wind up appealing to, once again, the kindly railway gentleman who helps them several times throughout the course of this book, and manages to get their father proven innocent, and the book basically ends with their father getting home. But in the meantime, the children prevent a train wreck from happening because there was a sort of a minor landslide over the tracks, so they have to risk their lives standing on the tracks to convince the train to stop before it hits the landslide. They, collect a boy who got stuck in a tunnel and broke his leg and, rescue him, and all sorts of things. So this is very much, they get into scrapes and they get out of them, but they also spend a lot of time doing a lot of various charitable, or at least kindly meant actions, from the birthday present for the kindly Perkins, and Perkins who gets his back up because he thinks it's charity, and they're forced to explain to him, no, it's because this guy says you're super awesome, so he said, here, have a thing, and that guy said you're super awesome, so have a thing. And Perkins is left going, oh, they gave me stuff because they like me, not because they feel sorry for me? Well, that's totally unexpected. Anyways, so yeah, this is an entertaining book. And yeah, I liked it. Possibly sorry I didn't read it sooner, but also I don't actually genuinely feel the lack, so I think my father may have overstated it, but I don't know. Maybe other people have other opinions. So that's all I have to say about this, and I will see you all next week.